Shalom Aleichem, I am Rabbi Kovacs, and the Mishnah Yomi today is beginning Eiruvin. We finished learning Shabbat on a Wednesday. We don't always finish Shabbat on a Wednesday, so Baruch Hashem we're zocheh to that. And now we're on to Eiruvin, first Mishnah, first chapter. Mavui shu gavoa l'molam esrim amma yamait. An alleyway which is taller than 20 amot, 20 cubits, must be lowered. Rabbi Yehuda Omer enod tzorich. Rabbi says you don't have to lower it. So first of all, let's figure out what is a mavui. This is translated as an alleyway. Now some say mavoi. If your Rebbe said mavoi, that's fine. Mavui is also commonly used. And this is a side street, typically a dead-end street. The way cities were structured was there was a Rishus Harabim, a main street or main thoroughfare that we're familiar with from Shabbat. And the Rishus Harabim typically ran from one end of the city to the other. There were side streets coming off of that. But the residential houses were off of a mavui, sort of a dead-end alleyway, and it usually had various chatzerim, courtyards, opening into the mavui, and one or more homes in each chatzer. So we have houses or apartments opening into a chatzer, a courtyard. We have chatzerim opening into a mavui. We have mavui meeting streets, and streets meeting the larger Rishus Harabim, the public thoroughfare. So this mavui, we're going to see there is a way to make it allowed to carry on Shabbat in a certain type of mavui. There's certain tikkunim you can do, and they make a shituf, which is a form of an eruv in the mavui, to allow the residents there to carry within the mavui on Shabbat. And one of the ways to allow carrying in the mavui, in this alleyway on Shabbat, was to place a crossbeam over the entrance between the mavui and the bigger street. So if this crossbeam is higher than 20 amot, people won't necessarily see it and won't remember the distinction between the mavui and the public street, and we can't allow carrying there. Now, this is actually quite similar to the first Mishnah in Sukkah, when we talk about the height of the Sukkah. And if people can't see the schach, maybe it's not a good sukkah. So here too, if they can't see the crossbeam at the entrance to the mavui, maybe not a mavui you can make an Eiruvin. Now the Mishnah continues, V'harochav me'eser amot, if it's wider than 10 amot, you might make it less wide. We're talking about the opening between the mavui and the street. Im yesh lo tzurat hapetach, but if this opening has the shape of a doorway, like the outline of a doorway, afal pishu rachav me'eser amot, even if it's wider than 10 amot, ein tzorich lamot, you wouldn't have to make it more narrow to allow carrying in such a mavui. Wonderful. On to Mishnah Bet, Hechsher Mavui. How do you make your Mavui kosher? Now, it's not through shechita and malicha. It's not through shechting it properly, proper kosher slaughter and salting. It's through, we're going to see, Beit Shammai Omrim, Lechi V'Korah. Beit Shammai says you need both a Lechi, that is a pole on the side of the opening, sort of, like a vertical pole or some sort of board, like a 2x4 standing at the side of the entrance, so you can tell that there's a distinction between the bigger street, or Rishus Harabim, and the Mavui. And the Korah is the crossbeam that we mentioned in Mishnah Aleph. So you need both a side beam and a top beam. Beit Hillel Omrim Lechi O Korah. Beit Hillel is more makel, they say one or the other, a side post or a top beam going across. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Lechayoyin. Now Lechayoyin is the plural of Lechi. That means he needs two lechis, one on each side. And the Gemara asks, maybe he needs that and a crossbeam, according to Beit Shammai. And the Mishnah continues with an interesting story here. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amar Talmid Echad Lifnei Rabbi Akiva. So one student came, and he had been learning by Rabbi Yishmael, and he came to Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara actually identifies him as Rabbi Meir, the famous Rabbi Meir. And he brought a teaching of Rabbi Yishmael and said it in front of Rabbi Akiva. He said, Lo nechleklu Beit Shammai Beit Hillel al Mavui shu pachud me'arba amot. He says the machlokis that we learned in this Mishnah is not about a mavui where the opening is less than 4 amot wide, shehu nitar obelechi obakor, because that can be saved and can be made kosher to carry in. Again, they're going to make a shituf. They're going to join property, we're going to learn about later, to allow carrying there. either with the lechi, the side beam, or bekora, the cross beam on top. O ma nechlaku, where did they disagree? O rochav me'arba amot vad eser, on one where the opening of the mavui is between 4 amot and 10 amot wide. Beit Shammai omrim lechi v'kora. That's where Beit Shammai says you need both the side beam and the top beam. Beit Hillel omrim o lechi v'kora. And Beit Hillel says in that case you need one or the other. Amar Rabbi Akiva said back to the Talmud, Ol Zeh v'Ol Zeh lech. So he said Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, they had a machlokes on any size opening of mavui. And actually the Gemara brings, if it's a very small opening, you might not need anything. If it's 4 tefachim or less, 4 hands breadths, the tefach is just a hand's width, you might not need any sort of heker, any sort of distinguishing mark, but anything bigger than that, they have this machlokes about what you need to make a distinction between the mavui and the public street. Shkoyach Rabotai, Mazel Tov on beginning Eiruvin.